Hello, hello. Oh, okay. There we go. I think it's working now. I thought it was, and then when I thought it was working, I tried to speak and nothing was happening on my end. I didn't see it going up in the mixer at all, so I was really worried. But no, it turns out it was working fine, I think. I think I just had something up on OBS. But welcome in, everyone. Welcome in. It's nice to be back streaming once again. Doing a little bit more reading, so it's going to be a kind of a soft cam stream today. Just a little bit of chatting and some reading. Whew, we're almost through the week. And it was a bit of a long one, I won't lie. I don't know what it was about this week for me, but it kind of went slowly. Kind of dragged a little bit. I don't know if anyone else felt that way, but I've been doing pretty well overall this week. I've been managing my time well, because oftentimes I have so much going on that it's sort of like it can be hard to stream, it can be hard to keep track of things, but I feel like I've gotten a handle on stuff. Especially with training and working out and going for runs. I will say I was doing legs today. And you know, anyone who's done legs knows that, like, when you finish legs and you've done your hamstrings and your quads and your calves and a little bit of your glutes, you're tired. Your legs feel heavy. You feel so wobbly. Hello, old soul. Welcome in. Wish you could stick around for long, but you'll enjoy what you can till work snaps you back to reality. Oh no. Well, maybe I don't know. Maybe it's possible that you can listen to me in the background. I don't know what type of work you do. If it's any sort of client-facing thing, then no, unfortunately. But I mean, if it's just like tippy-tappy at a desk, then maybe I can be like an audiobook. But you love some Celtic studies. They're quite fun. I actually I have another book that I'm thinking of doing sometime in the future. That's a translation of the Táin by Thomas Kinsella. It's one I've been recommended as, like, you know, kind of considered a very, very good translation of the Táin. But yeah, the one that we're reading now is very much a kind of deep dive into the mythological cycle, which is one of the 4 cycles of Ireland. But anyway, going back to the gym, I was just after, you know, finishing up my routine, and then I realized I also needed to go for a run too. And oh, I must say, at the very beginning, for the first minute of running, my legs felt so heavy. It felt like I was dragging them through snow or sand or something. Now, admittedly, I haven't dragged them through snow much. It doesn't snow very much in Ireland, especially where I am. But it was painful. But, you know, again, I always listen to US, like, army cadences. They're really good for hyping you up and getting you into that pace, or just on that rhythm of running. And literally one of the songs was about feel the pain in your legs, in your hands. And I was like, oh yes, this is exactly what I need. I need someone telling me that it's okay that you're feeling pain, just push through it. After about a minute, I felt my legs warm up proper. Like, I mean, they were already warmed up from all the exercising, but I think it was like, you know, I went from there to a track, and by that point my legs had started to just tire. They'd feeling the fatigue. So yeah, that was painful enough. And I will say, I did not run as long as I usually do. I could just feel I could feel it kind of after a while, how tiring it was. But, you know, someone like Alpen Albench will tell you straight up that things like squats and things like deadlifts are the most taxing on your body, both just generally and also on your central nervous system. And they are the most tiring of exercises because they're full body exercises. Obviously, they're primarily in the legs, but they work an entire sort of chain of muscles to keep everything tight and compact. and working properly. While if you're doing bench press or some other things, sure, there is other muscles working alongside it, but not in the fullness of body as, say, a squat or a deadlift. I need to do more deadlifts, to be quite honest. They're one of those exercises that I just don't do as much as I used to do, and also I kind of stay away from them because I have injured myself once on them, and it wasn't even with very heavy weight. It was just my form wasn't there. My mind wasn't on the the workout at hand, and I just let my form go. Oh, it was so annoying. It happened right before COVID though, so like literally like 2 days before COVID. So I was lying in bed, and then 2 days I learned everyone else got like stuck indoors. I was like, you know what, at least at least I can feel solace that, well, like COVID lockdowns I should say, at least I can feel solace that everyone else does not get to go to the gym either. I don't get to go to the gym, so you guys shouldn't be able to either. That's a very important thing. That would be a weird enforcement. Imagine that being a law in like in a country. You just have bodyguards, and they have to get a notification if it says that a certain person has gone to the gym. Speaking of like gym and athletics and stuff, I hope you guys have been enjoying watching the Olympics. I've watched bits and pieces here and there. I saw an absolutely incredible situation or example of synchronicity between the I think it was the Chinese divers. There was two of them, and you wouldn't have thought there were two of them watching just the live play. Obviously, it was shot from the side, and it looked like they were one person with how tight they were in terms of like their timing with each other. It was incredible. And I mean, like, that's the type of thing that like might happen by chance if you're kind of just like jumping together with your friend. You guys might line up perfectly. But to do it on a Olympic stage where you're being judged for that type of stuff, it takes some amount of training. You haven't seen any Olympic stuff, but you adore ice skating because you currently lack that level of dexterity and you are completely jealous. Ice skating is something that I haven't watched a ton of, but when I do watch it, I'm like, oh my god. I'm gonna be honest, I haven't skated many times in my life. I would say 4 or 5, and most of those times I have not been very good at skiing. I will not lie, I fall over sometimes. Obviously at the start you always fall over, but I think it's more so that like every time I tried to ski, it was, or not ski, sorry, skate, it was like years after the last time I tried. I'm sure if I went like 4 or 5 times in close timing, I'd probably be way better than I am normally. But yeah, the ability that they're able to not just skate on these tiny little edges, but they're able to do all these tricks. They're effectively able to dance and just do incredible feats. They are incredible athletes. Every Olympian is an incredible athlete, and of course then when you get into professional athletes, it's something that is just the level of ability is insane. And welcome in, Copyright. Thank you very much for the hydrate redeem. I've been very hydrated today, because I have been drinking a lot of water. But yeah, and I always think that at the level of like professional athletes and Olympians, that is when you are seeing the height of training, equipment, preparedness, and the height of genetics. Because I think to get to that level of sport, you obviously need to be predisposed to enjoying that sport and being good at that sport. But like, you can't just be good at that sport. You have to be, it's like Michael Phelps. I've heard that he is practically, if you were building a swimmer from the ground up, he would probably look like Michael Phelps. You could argue that, oh well, we'll just give the human fins, and well, not fins, you give them like webbed hands and feet. But it's like, that's going outside of the parameters of a normal human being. While if you were to just design a human that is good for swimming, Michael Phelps it is, And then there's other sports like uh, some what's her name again? Simone Biles. I would say that like if again similar to her, if you were building a you can't just land a quadruple axle and call it a day. No, you better work that into a whole goddamn routine. That's actually true, yeah, about ice skating. And a couple of other of like the athletic and gymnastic sports is they have to do those things as part of like I don't know much about ice skating, I must say. I but they have to do it as part of a full routine. Like even landing that in the first place is an impressive feat, but you have to be like, okay, I've done this. You're not just thinking that you've done it. You must be like clearing your mind straight away. Okay, I landed this or I didn't land this. Time to go on to the next thing. You don't have time to really consider how you're doing. You might have a little bit of time to like kind of play to the crowd a little bit if there's some of that, but like you need to be on point at all times. But yeah, I must admit, one of my main interactions with ice skating is I've told this story before on a large collab chatting stream on Diamandis' channel, but my main interaction with ice skating was through Yuri on Ice. Now I'm going to be honest, I didn't know, and I did not know that Yuri on Ice was what it was. I didn't know it was a BL anime. It was fun though. I thought it was just like an ice skating anime. I thought it was gonna be like Haikyuu or like any of the other like baseball or football or basketball sports animes. I was quite shocked and surprised when I saw some of the things that were happening. But by like I only kind of really clicked. I thought some of it was just funny little like teasing humor that you often see, like a little bit of fan service. And I was like, yeah, that's fair. And then they got really close, and I was like, wait a minute, hang on, something might be happening here that I did not consider. But by then it was too late, and I was already watching the show. So I continued to watch the show, and I continued to enjoy it. It was very, very enjoyable. And with that, we might get back into our reading today. And the book we were reading, which we are halfway through, is The Mythological Cycle of Medieval Irish Literature by John Carey. Now, in the last stream, what we covered was things mainly looking at the term of the mythological cycle itself, why, and it kind of broke down where that term came from, the person who kind of cemented the three schemes of the mythological story, the heroic saga, and then the Finn cycle, or the Fionn cycle, the Fianna cycle. And then later on, the King's cycle was added. Various different attempts to kind of reinterpret the cycles have been tried. But these are ones that have kind of stuck. But he outlined that there were some difficulties with the mythological cycle, because many of the stories tie, and many of the times when the mythological people who feature in them also appear in many of the other stories. Many of them relate directly to the heroic cycle, particularly the Táin Bó Cúailnge with Cuchulainn. And then we also looked at a deep insight into who the Tuatha Dé were, and it seemed this book made quite a strong stance that really the pre-Christian religion of pre-Celtic Ireland is very much, for the most part, gone, in a sense that we really only have access to it through these stories, which have come down to us obviously through a monastic, a Christian lens, but they still do give us real information about it, just not as in depth as some people might claim. We also did a couple of stories. We looked at a couple of stories, just kind of breaking down aspects and different interpretations of them, of various tales that were related to the Táin Bó Cúailnge. And now we are getting into the next chapter, which just is titled Further Old Irish Tales. So, let's begin. And I will say, I know much of this is also Old Irish, which has specific pronunciation. I'm not great I'm not great at Irish already. So some of my pronunciation may be off, but we'll see what we can do. Although references and borrowings elsewhere in the literature indicate that the story of Tochmach Etain, the wooing of Etain, was widely known, only one complete copy has survived. This is in the Yellow Book of Lecan. There is a second copy which has, however, suffered the loss of several leaves, in the Lower Nahidra. Turnison considered the Tochmach Etain, quote, can, on the basis of language, be assigned to the 9th century, but its reworking belongs approximately to the second half of the 11th. This view has been accepted by subsequent scholars. The story has often been translated, paraphrased, and summarized. In the synopsis that follows, I shall pay most attention to those elements which concern the realm of the Sheed. And again, this book is primarily focused on the Tuatha Dé, the creatures that inhabit the mythological cycle. I also say that there was some discussion on, the ways the Tuatha Dé were considered by the Christians, kind of different interpretations of that, as well as the Fomori, exactly what they are, if they are also just kind of Sheed people. But that stream is up if you want to get a deeper insight into that. The Wooing of Etain consists in fact of 3 stories, bound together by a single title and by a continuing line of narrative. The first of these begins with an account of the conception of the Mac Oak, as a result of an affair between the Dagda and Boand, and goes on to relate how he came to possess the Sheed of Bruig na Boin, a version of the tale given in the Gabal in Shida. He then won the beautiful Etain as a wife for his foster father, Midir, altering the landscape of Ulster in the process. But Midir already had a wife, the formidable Fumanach, who was both jealous and skilled in magic. Fumanach enchanted Etain so that she became a fly. A fly, a little buzzy boy. After many adventures, the transformed Etain fell into a vessel of wine and was swallowed by a woman who then conceived and gave birth to her as a mortal child. 1,012 years had passed since her first begetting. Etain grew up with no memory of her former existence, and when on one occasion Midir appeared to her, it does not seem that she recognized him. The Mac Oak tracked Fumanach down and killed her. This is obviously a very brief synopsis. The second part tells how Etain became the wife of Eachad Éireann, King of Ireland. That Eachad's marriage to her is indispensable to his full exercise of his kingship is one of the indications in the tale that Etain belongs to the category of female figures, often supernatural, who function in Irish legend as personifications of sovereignty. There's a very interesting tale. I can't remember it. I can't remember what the name of it is, but it's very much in line with this idea of a woman, a supernatural woman appearing before a king and marrying him or sleeping with him, or so in some sense choosing him, and that provides him with kind of a sense of sovereignty. It kind of justifies his ruleship over a particular area or Ireland itself, and so on and so on. There's a very interesting story of a version of that, but it tells the arrival, it kind of signifies the arrival of Christianity. And the supernatural woman tells about a king who will arrive that is very much, Jesus, and there's it references St. Patrick and that type of stuff. And it's a very interesting inversion where I remember reading a great breakdown of it. I'll try and find it maybe later and maybe read it on another stream. But it essentially argued that at the end, I believe she turns and walks away from the man that usually she would sleep with or marry or whatever. And this is meant to represent the sort of conquering of the spiritual aspect of Christianity that would eventually come. It provides a sort of sovereignty in line with the expected Irish tradition and legends that come down to the Christian monks, but inverted in a way that fits the Christian narrative and is sort of like an intertwining of those two brands, essentially, or schema, or worldviews. And some people would look at that and think, oh my god, Christians, completely destroying it. I think there's aspects of that, them trying to push their religion, which, I think every group does. Any group that doesn't actively protect and try to advance itself is likely to face some sort of, unless it's very insular, but it's very commanding and very insular to the point that it completely rejects any outside group, is likely not going to be long lasting. But I see it also as a way that the Christian monks, or the Irish Christian monks, to preserve aspects of their mythology, of their history and traditions. Mythology might not be the best word, but it's an intertwining that allows for an almost continuous, at least maybe from their perspective, a continuation of the old traditions with this new flourishing religion that had taken the country by storm, essentially. And I don't mean by storm, by violence. I'm sure there was violence in areas, but from what I've heard, generally the conversion of Ireland was, in comparison to many other areas, relatively peaceful. I'm sure there was the odd bit of tree chopping and idol destruction, but that's just par for the course. Éachaid's brother Ailill fell ill for love of her, and Etain agreed to sleep with him so that he could regain his health. Man, I should try that with someone. I'm so sick, I can only be cured by a kiss, and then just keep escalating. Instead of Ailill, however, a stranger came to the thirst. He eventually identified himself as Medea, and explained that he had caused Ailill's infatuation, and asked Etain to go away with him. She declined to do so without her husband's leave. Medea departed, and Ailill recovered from his sickness. In the third part, Medea induced Éachaid, who did not know his identity, to play the board game Fidkill, with him several times. At first, Éachaid won, and was able to make a series of demands of Medea, including the advantageous reshaping of parts of the landscape. But Medea won the last game, and insisted on being allowed to embrace and kiss Etain. Despite Éachaid's attempts to obstruct him, Medea was able to come and claim this prize, and he made use of this opportunity to transform himself and Etain into swans and to fly away with her. First by brute force, and then with the aid of magic, Éachaid set out about digging up Sheed Ban Feed in Munster, and subsequently Medea's own Sheed of Brileth. At length, Medea said that he would give Etain back to him, but Éachaid must choose her out of a group of 50 women, who all looked exactly like her. Éachaid made his choice, only to be later informed by Medea that he had selected his own daughter. When she gave birth to a girl, Éachaid ordered that this child of incest be exposed, but she was reared by a herdsman and his wife, and grew up to become the mother of Conair Mar, one of the greatest of the legendary kings of Ireland. Éachaid subsequently came to a violent end, of which various accounts are given. You guys can see that Irish mythology is pretty wild. The second part of the story also appears as an autonomous tale elsewhere in the Yellow Book of Lecan. Moreover, what Lucius Gwyn had described as a turgid retelling of this episode, supplemented with a scene from Togol Brúdna de Derga, describing Éachaid's first meeting with Etain, and a version of the Din Sencus of Rath Cruachna, which gives an alternative account of how Medea carried off Etain, together with one of her handmaids, provides the beginning of a complementary narrative in Egerton MS 1782. Sometimes there isn't like a name for a specific thing, so they just give like the reference code, essentially. Gwyn proposed for this compilation at date of a 12th or 13th century. Miles Dillon surely spoke for many when he wrote of the earlier version of the tale that it has a strange beauty, which perhaps no other Irish story shares. Tógmach Atain has often been regarded, especially in its first section, as a particularly close reflection of pre-Christian Irish myth, despite its composition by a medieval Christian author. Even if a mythological flavour be acknowledged, however, this can be variously interpreted, as when Mark Williams suggested that the portrayal of Dagda may have been modelled on literary accounts of the Roman god Jupiter, perhaps specifically on references to him in writings of Isidore of Seville. And it actually references a book. There's notes at the bottom, so sometimes I may read them, but it references Ireland's Immortals, and it just kind of backs up. It's just a quick quote from that book, but I actually have that book. It's a very big book, and it does a deep dive into the Tuatha Dé, and I would highly recommend to anyone who is interested in Celtic mythology or Celtic studies in general to pick up Ireland's Immortals. It is fantastic. When I first looked at the book, I got a weird sense that it was kind of going to be like a pop mythology and history book, but I was pleasantly surprised that it is a deep book. In terms of just references alone, many of those I don't recognize at all, but I was very much surprised and very happy. Excuse me a moment, I have to do something. Okay, I'm back. Now, let's continue. And Thomas Charles Edwards has shown that the actions of the Tuatha Dé in the story, whatever other resonances that they may have, can be understood. Oh, hello, Apop. Welcome back, welcome back. How are you? I hope you're doing very, very well. Is that a cozy emote? Is that what that is? Yeah, it's a comfy emote. I love comfy emotes. I love them so much. Because they just make me happy. My friend did a comfy emote for me. I don't have enough emote slots. I need to get more emote slots. Or maybe I just need to use more of my animated emote slots to kind of supplement what I can't have. It's a little bit sad, but it is what it is. But I will very quickly show you guys my very cute Ruadh comfy done by my friend Haru. I hope this is how you guys feel. You know what? We're gonna put a little comfy Ruadh right by the fire there. He's gonna be a happy little boy. That's me whenever I go to sleep. Please head pat me. I like when I get head patted. It helps me fall asleep. Yeah, that's exactly the face. A very happy little face. Where were we? Ah, yes. Thomas Charles Edwards has shown that the actions of the Tuatha Dé in the story, whatever other resonances they may have, can be understood in terms of the legal usage and dynastic geography of the 8th and 9th century. But for all that, this is a tale which has a relationship between the supernatural and mortal realms as a central concern, and this is reflected in many of its themes. Examples are Atain's metamorphoses and rebirth, the evocation of the qualities of beatific otherworld, the transgressions of the categories of space and time, and the difficulties confronted and strategies adopted in order to force entry into a Sheed. The stories discussed so far, the Gaboil in Sheeda, Ainsling Ongasu, the Kofor in the Mochida, Extra Neri, and Tógmach Atain, comprise the greater part of the old Irish texts that can be reasonably assigned to a notional, mythological cycle. While the viability of this category is, as we have seen, opened to serious doubt, it is striking that these tales can be seen to be interrelated in other ways. All of them set the stage for the great events of Irish epic. Ainsling Ongasu, the Kofor in the Mochida, and Extra Neri for the great war narrated in the Tain Bachulana. Tógmach Atain for the life and downfall of Conair Mar, as told in Tógal Brúdna de Derga. the Gaboil in Shida for the unfolding of Tokmark Etain itself. As we've seen, other elements connect these tales as well. The figures of the Dagda and his son are prominent in various of them. Bo's figures in Ainsley Ongasu and Dekofer in the Mohida, and the kings of the Sheed of Connacht, in a character in oh god, it's just everywhere. All of these, it's just throwing so many of these titles at me right now. In Dekofer in the Mohida and Extra Neri, a formal alliance called a Kerdes play a crucial role in the Gabal in Shida, in Ainsley Ongasu and in Dekofer in the Mohida. However, the circumstances to be understood, these stories of the people of the Sheed constitute a distinct group. This group's distinctiveness is thrown into further relief by the fact that two more old Irish tales, although also concerned with otherworld folk and of the Tuatha exhibit none of these characteristics. These are Tokmark Beckfola and Cockmaig Turid. The wooing of Beckfola is not generally included in the mythological cycle, but as an account of the supernatural adventures of a figure who evidently belongs to the people of the Sheed, it merits consideration here. It exists in two recensions, one preserved in the Yellow Book of Lecan and in TCDMS 1337. Has been said by Miles Dillon to be not later than the 9th century, while Mayor Brechnoch tentatively dates the original composition to the late 9th or early 10th century. The second recension is placed by Brechnoch towards the end of the 12th century or perhaps later. We are told how Diarmid mac Aed Sloin, a king of Tara whose death is placed by the annals in the year 664 or 667, met a beautiful woman who was travelling by herself in a chariot. He took her back to Tara to be his consort, since he had given her no bride price apart from a brooch. She came to be called Beckfola, as in Beck, small, and Fulled, property. She fell in love with Diarmid's foster son, and prevailed upon him to elope with her. In the event, however, he did not come to their thirst. After losing the handmaid who had accompanied her, she wandered in the forest, coming at length to the campfire of a mysterious warrior. Hello, Widdy. Thank you for the lurk. I hope you enjoy. I hope you have a good day. The stranger brought her to a magnificent but apparently empty hall on the island, where they were magically provided with food. Next morning, he and his three brothers fought with their four cousins for possession of the island. Beckfola offered herself to the stranger, but he declined to take her until he had won his inheritance. She returned to Tara to find that no time had elapsed during her absence. In a year's time, the warrior came to Tara to say that another battle for the island had been fought, a conflict of which he was the sole survivor. Beckfola went away with him, and as she departed, was denounced by Diarmid as an evil spirit, an Urchud. It was subsequently revealed that the magical island was Devonish, site of an ecclesiastical settlement in County Fermanagh, and Diarmid made a gift to the monastery there of the treasure found in the bodies of the 7 slayed warriors. This story has been compared with the Tristan legend and its various analogues, but resemblances to the second part of Tokmark Etain seem at least likely to be significant, and do not appear to have attracted comment hitherto. Like Etain, in Togol Brudna de Darga, Beckfola is alone when first encountered by the King of Tara, who later makes her his wife, and in both cases the scene provides the occasion for an extended description of the heroine's appearance. Beckfola, like Etain, is evidently of supernatural origin, and finally disappears into the other world, but in the main narrative she appears to be unaware that she is not like other mortals. Like Etain, she makes an assignation with a man closely related to her husband, the brother in one case, the foster son in the other. But the prospective lover fails to appear at the designated place. Instead, she meets a splendid supernatural warrior, who eventually carries her off. It is striking that all of these elements can be paralleled specifically in the version of the Etain story, which forms the first part of the compilation in Egerton MS 1782. Even Beckfola's departure from Tara, accompanied by a handmaid, can be compared with the episode borrowed from the Dinsenkus of Wraith Cruachna. Beckfola's otherworld experiences involve anomalies of mortal whereabouts and duration. The supernatural island at the heart of the story seems sometimes to be in Leinster and sometimes in Connacht, and the entirety of her adventure takes no time at all from the perspective of those who have stayed in Tara. These oddities led James Carney, memorably, to characterise Tokmak Beckfola as a peculiar confused tale. But I have argued that they should, on the contrary, be regarded as central elements in a story concerned with fundamental otherness of the realm of the Sheed. Patrick Sims Williams, while inclined to accept this analysis, has taken it a step further, with the persuasive suggestion that the northern and southern location of the island are linked by the presence in both of the cult of Saint Méadach, who was himself connected with Devonish, and the further suggestion that Devonish may have been the place of the tale's composition. Joanne Findon. There's so many other names being mentioned here, isn't there? Scholars and such. Joanne Findon has been more concerned with Beckfola as a conscious and speaking subject, and with the ways in which the earlier version of the tale in particular gives her a, quote, voice and mind of her own. That such a woman can find an appropriate mate only in the other world may be significant. The chief saga of the mythological cycle, according to Dillon, is Cat Meg Turid, the Battle of Mag Turid, and this assessment would surely be echoed by many other scholars. Although the story is often alluded to in the literature, I hope you're getting nice and cozy, copyright. Although the story is often alluded to in the literature, extracts from a lost copy of it have survived in at least one glossary. This is another text which has come down to us in only a single manuscript, that being the London B.L. Harley MS 528. This single copy, moreover, lacks the conclusion. Oh, painful. As it has survived, the tale is clearly has various strata. Thus, to cite one of the most obvious instances, its open paragraphs have been taken from the Lower Gabala Éireann. Elizabeth Gray, Cat Maig Turid's most recent editor, has accepted the view of Gerard Murphy and others that it seems to be true that the story under consideration is indeed the product of an 11th or 12th century redactor working mainly upon 9th century material. And there's various arguments for this linked in the notes below. Just kind of mentions of different articles. That's good to hear. After this redactor has situated the narrative within the framework of Middle Irish pseudo-history, we are told how the conception of Bress resulted from a fleeting union between a princess of the Tuatha Dé Danann, who had recently become the rulers of Ireland, and a king of the Fomori from beyond the sea. When Nuadu was obliged to forfeit the kingdom of Ireland because of the loss of his arm, he would later replace it with a silver arm. Bress was chosen in his place. Bress proved, however, to be the epitome of a bad ruler, avaricious, guilty of false judgments, and without regard for the due ordering of society. Under his rule, the Fomori opposed the Tuatha Dé, the greatest of whose lords were forced to toil as slaves. At last, Bress was manoeuvred into pronouncing a false judgment, following which his meanness provoked a satire from the poet Capra, and he was obliged to resign his rule. There's a long note here. As Okasazig has noted, the false judgment and satires are doublets, both performing the same function in the narrative. Capra's satire is the subject of a separate anecdote, preserved in other works. Besides being referred to in various medieval glossaries and in the poem Tarig Shachna Ashil Brian. In the last instance, curiously, the satire is attributed not to Capra, but the Cridenbell, another satirist of the Tuatha Dé. In the view of the poem's editor, Roisin McLaughlin, this divergence can be regarded either as reflecting a different tradition or as representing the deliberate manipulation by the poet of his material in order to render his own threat of satire more potent. Welcome in, Clever, welcome in. You have to do more reading streams. They're so relaxing. I'm going to try and do more. It's kind of hard because I want to play more BG3, but I find these streams are very easy on me when I have a tiring day. And this book is quite short, so it's easy to get through it nice and quick. I hope you're doing well, Clever. Get nice and cozy. Get nice and cozy, like little comfy Ruadh down there. Nuadu, whose arm has been magically restored, resumed the kingship. Fleeing to the land of the Fomori, Bress prevailed upon his father to raise an army to invade Ireland and restore him to the throne. That wouldn't be the first time that's happened, and it would eventually lead to our oppression, I have to say. You gotta go to work now. Have a fabulous day. No worries, Odell. Oiled Soul, thank you so much for joining. Well, it was nice to meet you, and thank you for redeeming the stretch. I hope work goes nice and quickly, and you can relax. Unless you really enjoy your work and it's super interesting and cool, then I hope something super interesting and cool happens. But thank you for joining us. At this time of crisis, there appeared the youthful hero Lug, a sort of opposite of Bress, having a father from the Tuatha Dé and a mother from the Fomori. Recognizing Lug's superior qualities after the youth's dramatic arrival at Tara, Nuadu handed authority over to him. Himself possessed of every skill, Lug was able to coordinate the various abilities of the other Tuatha Dé so as to make them into a fighting force of the greatest possible effectiveness. In the climactic Battle of Magturid, the Fomori were defeated and Bress was captured. To buy his life, he was obliged to reveal the best times for ploughing, sowing and reaping. Since the 19th century, Cath Maig Tuired has been regarded as a reflection of a Celtic myth, itself deriving from a yet older Indo-European account of the War of the Gods. There's a long note here. Various references see Carey myth and mythology, in search of the Indo-European interfunctional war. There's a posthumously published discussion. A quote here: the most important Irish mythological tale presents what must be a large part of the Irish pantheon, and the gods were assigned roles that doubtless reflect something of their pre-Christian character. But the evidence for such an Indo-European proto-myth is problematic. Not only is the polarization of the Tuatha Dé and Fomori not reflected in all of the sources, but the opposition between Devas and Asuras in India, and between Aesir and Vanir in Scandinavia, appears also to be secondary. I'm grateful to one of this book's anonymous readers for calling attention to this point. Oh, that's why you get readers to check out your work before you publish it. I needed a drink. Where were we? Oh yes. Comparison with material and other Celtic traditions shows that some of the narrative's central themes must all indeed have a pre-Christian basis, but this is by no means the key to the whole story. Writing in 1940, Marie-Louise, I do not know how to pronounce that, Sjöstedt, allegedly remarked upon the importance of the narrative of circumstances which reflect conditions familiar in Celtic societies, political and domestic, thereby pointing in a direction which was subsequently explored by Gray in a series of important articles. Kim McCone has suggested further approaches, that the story is, to a significant extent, influenced or indeed inspired by the Old Testament's account of the first kings of Israel, and or that it had an overall, quote, contemporary political message, the importance of social cohesion and rallying around the Tara kingship in order to repel foreign attacks. And you guys have to keep in mind, too, what was happening in Ireland around the you know, late 8th to ninth, 10th century. That's correct. The Viking invasions. So there's definitely a reason why the various kings and why the poets and historians and others would be so focused on rallying support around repelling invaders. In an article published at around the same time, I made an extended case for the explanatory power of the latter analysis, arguing that Cath Maig Turid seems to be in several respects an innovative work rather than a traditional one, and it should be understood as the creative redeployment of inherited materials in response to the social and cultural situation at the time of its composition. Following the scholarly consensus with regards to the main body of the tale as being essentially a text of the 9th century, I see it as reflecting anxieties concerning traditional values at a time of cultural change, as Scandinavian influences began to affect the fabric of Irish society. We get into Chapter 5, Lore and Fantasy in the Middle Irish Period. All the texts considered so far, actually, I just remembered I need to turn off ads before they blow out everyone's ears. Whew, that was... oh. It tried not to turn them off. It tried to sneakily stay on and not think that I clicked the button. That would have been... I would have been angry at Twitch. But I stopped it. You guys won't get your eardrums blown out this time, I promise. All of the texts considered so far appear to have been... Hello, Benji. Welcome in. Thank you so much for the follow. And hello, welcome in to Madrimi. Wait, Madram Imi. Madra. Can I call you Madra? I like Madra. Madra is a nice name. Hi, Madra. But thank you for the hydrate routine. It's important to keep your voice nice and... or your throat nice and lubricated. Madra, yeah. Madra. Well, actually, Madra is a dog in Irish. I just realized. I didn't make that connection before I called you it, I swear. Yeah, for most people can't even say it, so they say Mimi. I thought it was cute. Madra, yeah. We'll stick with Madra. We'll pretend that, like, I'm not just calling you dog in Irish. I promise. Mimi was also one I considered, but then I kind of saw Madra. I think it might be interesting. I think it can be cool to have, like, you know, different streamers will call you different things. Many streamers call me various things in attempting to pronounce my name. I sometimes wonder if I should cut my name down to, like, Rua Ua or something, like my Twitter. My Twitter handle is just Rua Ua. And should I take away the Quilta part? Copyright doing the name pronunciation. Well, as many of you know, and maybe some of you don't know, my name is Rua Ua Quilta. Rua Ua Quilta. Yes, the C-A-I-L-T-E is pronounced Quilta. Sort of like wheel, but pronounced with a Q. Quilta. Quilta. The emphasis on the wheel part. Wheel. really pronounce that H. Wheel. Wheel. Cool whip. I love the DH throws a lot of people, I imagine. Yeah, it's often Ruadh. Which isn't... actually, yeah, Ruadh wouldn't be that bad, but it's often like Ruadh. Ruadh? Ruadh. Some people think that the Ua part is like part of the name too, so they'll say like Ruadh Ua, and they'll get very confused. Hey, rude. No, that would be mean. Don't call me rude. I just joined and I just said hello. You don't have to call me rude in the stream chat. But the thing that's kind of handy, I must say, about it is that when I do go into a stream and a streamer or a VTuber really struggles to say my name, I get to go, oh no, it's pronounced Rua, and someone eventually almost always goes, oh, is that Irish? And I go, yes, it is Irish. And then I get to like talk with people in chat. I get to talk with the streamer. I don't talk with people in chat too much. I feel like if you're having a conversation in chat, that's a bad thing. like with another chatter. At most, I think you should have 2 replies and then back to whatever the streamer's doing. 3 if you're really pushing it, but that's just kind of like an aspect of being respectful to the streamer and stuff. But it kind of gives my name kind of gives me that in with various kind of just an in to get to talk to the streamer and kind of see what they're about. It's fun. It's nice. But I hope you guys enjoy the reading and get nice and cozy. All of the texts considered so far appear to have been first composed in the 8th or 9th century, perhaps in some cases in the early 10th. They were modified in the course of their transmission in the Middle Irish period, and during this period new versions of several of them were composed. There is, however, at first sight, curiously little evidence of the composition of new tales concerning the Tuatha Dé between the 10th and 12th century. 2 notable exceptions to this generalization are the section in the Laur Gabála Éireann, which is the Book of Invasions, that describes the rule over Ireland of the Tuatha Dé Danann, which can itself, however, scarcely be described as a tale. And the Din Shenkis, narratives that have members of the Tuatha Dé as their protagonist. In the Laur Gabála Éireann, it's also known as the Book of the Taking of Ireland. There's generally, is it 4 or 5 invasions? Nemid, Mori, 5 invasions. The Tuatha Dé Danann are presented as the fourth of the races to have settled Ireland after the flood, and as the predecessors to the Gaels. The text speaks of their conquest of the island, enumerates their kings, and provides an elaborate account of their genealogy, which is developed and extended in the course of the work's evolution. An essential feature of this treatment is its euhemerism. As Mark Williams observes, the crucial innovation of the Irish pseudo or synthetic history lay at its explicit insistence that the Tuatha Dé had been a race of men and women. And the importance of this development can hardly be overstated, as a basic fate in the fundamental historicity of this narrative prevailed for centuries, so that it effectively became Ireland's official framework for its native gods. For all the importance of its influence on later literature, it is also necessary to recognize that the view of the Tuatha Dé, this view never triumphed entirely. Even within the Laur Gabála Éireann itself, the idea that they were supernatural beings resurfaces repeatedly. They are often identified as demons in the passage cited in the above. On page 11, so you guys will have to go back to page 11 and just guess what page I'm on. For all the importance of its influence, besides allusions to the events of Cat Meg Tuarid, a few brief stories are also included in the Laur Gabála Éireann. Thus, the recension known as Mínagud explanation contains under the title Imtuchta Tural Picro Amach. That's a weird word for an Irish title. Picrio. The Wanderings of Tural Picrio and His Sons. A poem with prose paragraph which tells how the 3 sons of Tural Picrio acquired several magical treasures in order to recompense Lug for the killing of his father. While the second recension includes a strange story of how the Tuatha Dé, before coming to Ireland, used their magic to assist the Athenians in a war against the Philistines. Based? just popping over to Athens for a while. In addition, the second recension gives a description of how the Tuatha Dé formerly resided in the 4 cities in the north of the world, where they studied magic under the 4 masters, and from which they brought 4 treasures to Ireland. This account also exists as a separate and apparently autonomous tract. Indeed, it is probably a version of this that was absorbed by the Laur Gabála Éireann as the latter evolved and expanded. And that's the 4 jewels. There's a note here. It may, however, be queried whether this item really counts as a tale, rather than as a bit of legendary lore, Another such case is the short poem Thomas Teague Mech Ind Uk, the measurement of the house of Mac Ind Uk. Imagine having a story, a mythological story about measuring some guy's house. Maybe it's like a 4D house. It's like a 4D house and it's really hard to measure. Everybody wanted to pretend to be Greek for a few centuries there. Well, I believe the Irish actually, they some aspects of Irish like where the Gaels come from, some of it says that they came from I believe it was a Scythian princess who married an Egyptian pharaoh or like an Egyptian prince. Philoi, there we go, the ancient name for Greek weebs. Greek weebs. Greece was the Japan of the ancient world and the medieval world, I suppose. Greaves, if you will. Ew, that sounds disgusting. That sounds like a bug. I feel like if someone was like, "Hey, do you want?" Like, you'd go to like a strange country to go eat grebes, or you'd like lift a rock and there'd be a bunch of grebes under there. You know what bug I really love? When I see them, I just always think they're like, oh, cute. Roly polies. I just think they're like big and fat and silly looking. Anyway, but yeah, it's interesting the way. I mean, there's a reason. There's a reason. So much of our philosophy and even aspects of religion come from Greece. I mean, Aristotle or Thomas Aquinas' first way, the unmoved mover, is essentially the same argument as Aristotle's. Now, of course, it's further expanded upon to reach the Christian God, or at least not necessarily the Christian God, but the God of theology, or of philosophy. But like, I mean, that's a good example there of clear influence. And just Aristotle in general had massive influence, and of course Plato. You know, much of kind of the European things are just you can trace back to Greece in some fashion. Tons of ancient aristocracy and tribal leaders all ended up trying to go, we're Greek. Look at this knockoff Greek pottery I got from my tomb. I would totally do the same. I would. You know what I would do? You know what I would do? I would try and get Greek pottery, Roman pottery, like a bunch of just random pottery from all over the place, and then like I'll leave like the people who come rob my tomb be really confused. Well, ideally the people who come to rob my tomb are like excavators and archaeologists, not some random guy who's just gonna like destroy this clay pot because like, why is this clay pot here? Not knowing it's like a invaluable artifact from like Carthage or something. Where were we? Reminds you of a Saxon grave that just had Byzantine buckets next to him. That is so based. If I was some random Saxon peasant, but I somehow got access to like a Byzantine, let's say it's like a Byzantine spoon. It's just a like it's just a nicely crafted spoon. That shit's going on my grave. You best believe I'm taking that with me to I'm taking that Byzantine spoon with me. I never heard of that though. I'm gonna have to look that up later. That sounds very funny. Here we are. The first and third recensions of the Lower Gabala Aaron and the Minuid further contain the long poem Steed, or Stid. Ulhu Ken On. Listen, scholars without flaw. An enumeration of the deaths of the Tuatha Dé Danann composed by Flann Mainstock, died AD 1056. And there's a note here that just says, Williams is correct when he states that Flan's purpose in composing this poem was to insist on Tuathade's mortality. I think, however, that he may go too far when he argues that it is as much satire as historical scholarship. Besides information that is also found in the prose of the Leabhar Gabála Érenn and in Cath Maig Tuared, Flann alludes to the Lug's killing of Kermit, son of the Dagda. How the Dagda got his magic staff, below. Oh, that's the name of the story we'll be looking at later. And to the deaths of Bress, Boand, and Aidh, son of the Dagda, as these are related in Densenkus anecdotes. You'll link it if it's okay. I shall be a good camp follower and not interrupt the storyteller now. Yeah, put it into the Discord, and I'll take a look at it. That sounds really fun. That sounds like the archaeologist must have been so confused. Why is this Saxon guy? Why does he have Byzantine buckets? I imagine it was just some random Byzantine trader that just came along and was like, "Oh hey, my buckets are." They like pointed at the pretty buckets, and he was like, "You want one?" He was like, "Okay." These freaks, these Saxon barbarians like a bucket. Imagine if I brought like some armor over here. Something actually expensive. Or maybe they are really nice buckets. The accounts which Flann gives of the killings of Abcon by Angus and of the death of Midir's wife Fumanach differ from what we find in other sources, but can by the same token be taken to be variances of existing tales rather than mere fabrication. There is accordingly good reason to presume that lost stories lie behind the other allusions in the poem. The Densenkus collections include dozens of tales or allusions to tales whose main characters belong to the Tuatha. Some of them are so truncated that it is hard to be confident that any authentic tradition lies behind them. They may well represent no more than perfunctory ad hoc fabrication. Others share so many characters or plot elements with better known stories that it seems probable that they have been more or less directly based upon them. Elsewhere, however, we appear to have alternative versions of tales, not merely items deriving from them, such as the accounts of the death of Bress at Cairn Unet, and of Midir's abduction of Etain and the Densenkus of Raeth Essa and Raeth Cruachna. Let me take a quick look through these notes. I don't think there's anything interesting. Some anecdotes, although they are brief, contain so much curious detail that it is unlikely that they were devised merely to explain place names. Particularly conspicuous examples are the stories of battles with water monsters undertaken by Dian Cecht and the Dagda. There are several versions of the story of how Boand defied the power of a magic well and was first mutilated and then drowned by an upsurge of punishing waters, which became the course of the River Boyne. It has been shown that significant elements within this account almost certainly derive from pre-Christian myth. The early origins of the doublet legends describing the origins of Loch Naig and Loch Ree, involving the actions of magical horses belonging to Ongus and Midir, are evident from the existence of significantly older version of the former story, in a poem in the Oxford Bodleian Library. In this poem, however, there is, by contrast with the Middle Irish tellings, nothing to indicate the involvement of any of the Tuatha. These remarks by no means exhaust all that could be said concerning this material. It is a rich corpus concerning which it is impossible to generalize. It does seem safe to say, however, that the stories of the Tuatha composed during the Middle Irish period were for the most part either retellings of older tales or brief anecdotes absorbed in the greater systematization of lore that was so characteristic of the time. But there are a handful of exceptions to this generalization, to which we now turn. The short tract that begins, Kia trede kenta labratar erna genamain fochetor, what three first spoke immediately after their birth? Question mark. That was a question. Preserved in the Yellow Book of Lecan and missing the end of the text in the Book of Leinster, comprises 3 stories, the first of which describes the first utterance of Ide, son of Olam. Fiachu, in other sources Fiachna, Mac Delbreth, Beth, one of the Tuatha Dé Danan's kings of Ireland, according to the Suter historical scheme codified in the Lower Gabala Éireann, was feasting with his brother, the Fili poet-scholar, Olam, when all heard a great blast of wind. The king's druid said that this wind betokened the birth of a son to Olam's wife, whose rank would be the same as the king's Eventually, an even loftier rank would come, this being the order of the church. When the child was born, Fiachu commanded that he be killed, but Olam prevented this, and I then recited a poem in which he demanded from the king a series of rich gifts, quote, for your honour's sake. These gifts were granted. This little tale is a social allegory, the key to which lies in the names of the characters. I is a word for poetry, while Olam designates an individual who's reached the highest rank in any of the professions, but most particularly a master poet. You were looking and it happened again in Sutton Hoo recently. That's so funny. Hang on, I'm gonna pin that so I watch it later. But he was the other one that was taped, at least. Hang on, let me pin it. What? Excuse me? The uploader has not made this video available in your country? Very rude. Saxon love buckets, seems to. James Kearney has observed, quote, it was not primarily a tale told for entertainment. Indeed, it is not particularly entertaining. Its main point that it stresses that the rights owing to the learned class by the wielders of power, by an ancient contract going back to the Tuatha Dé Danann days. The King of Ireland granted sustenance to men of art, and a social position for an Olam equivalent to a king. And that's a very interesting part of the Irish hierarchy, is that you do have individuals who are basically on par with a king. And it often kind of makes me think that it's, sometimes I think about Plato's Republic, where you have the tiered society, and most, not nearly all societies back then were very much tiered. But like, these poets, and then also the oh god, what were they called? Essentially the lawyers, the people who knew all the Irish law tracks. Oh, I can't remember their name. That's so maddening right now. But they would travel from area to area. Sometimes they would stay in an area. Welcome in, Johan the Butcher. Welcome, welcome. Thank you for joining us. They would all have a similar position in the hierarchy as the king. And the king's job was the ruling and giving out of judgments. But the lawyer, whose name I cannot remember, Breton's. Why could I not remember? Breton law, yeah. If I had just thought Breton law, that would have been... Oh my god, I'm so dumb. I'm so dumb sometimes. I think it's one of those things that happens the odd time where it's like a word's on the tip of your tongue, but you just cannot get it. You cannot. I tried to call them Bretons at first. No. That's a totally different thing. But yeah, I can see why someone would be like, oh, Breton. That's what they were called. But no, Breton. I know that there's a YouTube channel that like goes through, it's like Irish or like medieval Irish law or something. I can't remember what the name is, but I'll probably post them in my Discord later. But like they just go deep dive into the Irish law tracks and kind of the structure and hierarchy and law of that period of Ireland. But that's embarrassing that I couldn't remember the term Breton. A version of this story already existed in the Old Irish period, from a series of questions and answers in the section of the legal text Brehe Nemid Déanach, Second Judgments of Status, that is headed Tuarstal Nua, testimony of poetry. It appears that poetry, I, was first recited by I, son of Olam, to Fiachna, son of Delve, for a reward of 30 cows. One element peculiar to the Middle Irish version, which must however be very old, is the wind which serves as an omen of I's birth. It can scarcely be a coincidence that the word I itself appears to derive from an Indo-European root, meaning to blow, to breathe, but there is no reflection of such a putative original sense in the Irish word's attested use. The symbolic figures of Olam and I are a particularly clear example of the way in which members of the Tuatha Dé, in particular those associated with the arts, could figure in what Williams has characterized as a, quote, kind of meta mythology for intellectuals, helping to underpin the Philid's cognitive ideology. They came, however, to be regarded as being just as real as any of the other characters in Ireland's legendary history. I's death is included in Flan's poem, and Olam's is noted in Laur Gabála Éireann. The story to which Osborne Bergen gave the title How the Dagda Got His Magic Staff is found uniquely in fragmentary form in the Yellow Book of Lecan. It describes how the Dagda's son Kermid was killed by Lug, here called the High King of Ireland, in revenge for having seduced the latter's wife. The Dagda embalmed his body and then carried it on his back into the eastern world. There he met 3 brothers, who were engaged in dividing the treasures, shade, left by them by their father. These were a mantle and a shirt, which respectively granted their wearer the ability to change his appearance and protected him against disease. So the mantle allowed them to change appearance, and the shirt protected against disease. And a staff, one end of which brought death to the living, while the other revived the dead. That would be a that would be a very interesting quarterstaff. Imagine you just keep hitting someone over and over, and you keep like killing them and reviving them. The Dagda asked to be allowed to hold the staff, and immediately used it to kill the 3 brothers and to bring Kermid back to life. Based Dagda? The good dog, or the good god? Just insta-giving these guys. Imagine, like, that's basically like you're dividing a bunch of, like, gold and money that you got from your, like, father, and then there's also, like, a gun there. And you're like, hey, can I, and like, some random guy comes up and be like, hey, can I see that gun? You're like, okay. And then he just shoots you. What could you expect to happen when you gave this big, hulking god a staff that can kill you instantly? When Kermit reproached him for having slain the brothers, he restored their lives to them also, but insisted on borrowing the staff for as long as it took to, quote, kill his enemies with it and revive his friends. In this way, he gained the kingship of Ireland for himself. Kermit's affair with Lug's wife and its fatal consequences are mentioned in other Middle Irish sources, and the Dagda's staff, or lorg, features briefly in Cath Meag Turid, while its ability to take and to restore life is described in the Book of Leinster version of the saga Mesca Ulad. So far as I can see, it is an open question whether these texts draw upon a version of our story, or the story itself a confection based on such traditions. The language suggests a date fairly late in the Middle Irish period. The tale's broader affiliations have not yet been investigated. On the one hand, the 3 brothers dividing the father's wealth are reminiscent of Kermit's own sons, as they are portrayed in Laur Gabála Éireann. Or, more distantly, the sons of Toril Picaro gathering magical treasures as weregild for the bereaved Lug. On the other hand, the story of a wanderer who makes his fortune when he is asked to assist in the division of property, often involving magical treasures, is well known as an international folk tale. The style of our narrative seems compatible with the intersection within it of popular and learned registers. Next story. Togoil Sheed Truin. The Sack of Sheed Truin. Uniquely preserved in TCD MS 1337, takes up only 10 lines of printed text. How did you have so many lines of text then for this one thing? We are told how Bove attacked Sheed Truam and contended with its propator, Cruachan. When the struggle began to go against Bove, his son Saron came to his aid, and the two of them prevailed. For all its brevity, the story is quite difficult to understand in detail. This is due to deliberate obfuscation on the part of the author, who peppers his account of the fight with such otherwise unattested words as rabbaying and ilping. Any consideration of this enigmatic anecdote should take note of the fact that it is the first in a series of short items, all of which are designated by their obscurity. Two of these, Tokmark Beas Banjuad, the wooing of Beas the Druidess, and Tain Ruinada, the cattle raid of Ruinade, contain arcane rhythmical speeches or rhetorics. Another, Coth Sleeve Coin, the Battle of Sleeve Coin, resembles Togol Sheed Truim inasmuch as it is a prose narrative without dialogues. The four pieces have widely varying contexts. The speech in the wooing of Beas the Druidess is addressed to Fiachna Fartok, said to have been the father of Crahor Macnessa. The Battle of Sleeve Cain describes a battle between Fionn MacCool, and his arch rival Gol MacMorna, and the background of Tain Baruanada is unclear. One thing which the latter two have in common with one another, and with Togol Sheed Truim, however, is that all three contain accounts of combats which are rendered obscure by the use of rare or otherwise unattested terminology. These shared traits may have led the scribe or an earlier compiler to group them together. Alternatively, some or all of them may be the work of a single author. A third possibility, which could only be attested by a closer study of all four texts, is that some may have been composed in imitation of the others. My own suspicion is that this is the case with Togol Sheed Truim. Several of its verb forms seem to be later Middle Irish, and by contrast with Tain Borudana and Coth Sleeve Coin, the riddling words are not so far as I can see found elsewhere. These words may accordingly be fresh coinages on the part of an author, lacking real familiarity with the traditional poetic language, the Berlin Affilid. Perla is the Irish word for English, or the English of the... I'm guessing maybe it's just like meant to be like the language of the Philly. Between Tukmark Beas Banjuad and Tain Borudana, there is a fifth text which has not yet been published, bearing the heading Bruigan Seinbeck Hilbrick, the hostel of Senbeck ua Ibrick, relates how Cuchulainn encountered the diminutive Tuatha Dé musician Senbeck beside the Boyne, and how the latter recited a poem to him. And other accounts of such meetings between Senbeck and Cuchulainn are found in Breha Nemed Dennoch, and as part of a collection of the Ulster Cycle material. It is debatable whether stories of supernatural encounters that are set in the historical period can be assigned to a mythological cycle. This doubt attaches, for instance, to Tokmark Beckfola, discussed above. 3 Middle Irish instances may be noted here. An anecdote in Liber Flavus Fergororum Syrium relates how the poet MacCoys encountered a giant woman weeping beside a lake. She told him that her lover had been killed in a sheed and had then been buried at the church of Clan MacNoise. MacCoys, relating his adventure to the King of Ireland, Cogalach Mac Mael Mihig, reigned from 944 to 956. When the monks of Clan MacNoise were asked about this, they said they knew of no recent burial there, but a monk died shortly thereafter, and the digging of his grave led to the discovery of a corpse of a gigantic and strikingly beautiful man. The king ordered that the grave be filled in again until it had been decided what to do about this find, but when the grave was opened a second time, the body disappeared. Reminder that one of the reasons the Romans wouldn't come over to Ireland to invade us, they claim that it just wasn't economically viable. Oh no, because there were giants here. I wonder. In the Book of Lismore and the Book of Fermoy, there is a story headed Scale Saltruck na Mecca, the tale of the pig's salter. In the latter, of a bishop named Cain Cormac, who moved from Clonmacnoise to the island monastery of Innis Endem in Lochary. When his monks were cooking a pig, a man emerged from the lake and informed Cain Cormac that he had come from a monastery beneath it. Quote, "For it is not more difficult it is not more difficult for the Lord that people should dwell beneath the waters than in other places." The young men of the underwater monastery had transgressed and had been transformed into swine and expelled as punishment. It was one of these youths, the son of Cain Cormac's informant, who was now over the fire. The stranger made Cain Cormac a present of his dead son's salter, an object which was subsequently preserved at Clonmacnoise as the pig's salter. Cain Cormac permitted the body to be returned to the lake people for burial, and was invited to visit the underwater monastery. Thereafter, he continued making such visits throughout his life, and we are told that there are never any, quote, concealment upon it for him. When he eventually disappeared, it was conjectured that he might have gone to live beneath the lake. The mysterious folk in this story are ecclesiastics, but their underwater existence, the mention of concealment and their powers of shape-shifting, seem to identify them with the people of the Sheed. The Yellow Book of Lecan and RIAMS D42 contain a brief tale to which its most recent editor has given the title Bobibliacht Mec Lonan. This relates how the celebrated poet Flann Mac Lonan died in AD 920, when stranded by a storm along with his followers, without provisions in an empty house. A great savage peasant, Aethok Mor Barda, with a bullhook came to them, a billhook, and offered them his cow as food if they would promise to give him in return any cow that he was asked for. When they agreed, he slaughtered and cooked the cow, and distributed the meat to the company, so that they were all well fed. After a year he returned, this time with 4 companions. The 5 were menacing and abusive, and the cow that was demanded was a cow always in milk, Bithblicht. Flann recite. Excuse me. I thought someone was getting loud outside, so I had to mute myself, but let's continue. Flann recited a poem describing his predicament, upon which the stranger announced that this was what he had been seeking. For poetry is always milk. Is Bithblicht in Terketal. He further revealed that he was not a commoner, but Ongus, son of Boand, the Macok. This curious little story is variously reminiscent of the conclusion of the saga Fled Brickran, or Bricku's Feast, at which the wizard king, Cúroy, comes in the disguise of a gigantic bacloch to challenge the warriors of Ulster at a feast, menacing them with his axe, and of an anecdote in Sanus Cormac, in which the spirit of poetry makes a fool of the master poet Sencon Torpist, wearing the semblance of a hideous beggar. I wonder, is there some influence here from Odysseus' return in the Odyssey? Tales of incongruously disguised beings with supernatural powers, sometimes identified as belonging to the Tuatha Dé, enjoyed renewed popularity in the early modern period. Although I believe that such anecdotes as the story of MacCoys, Cain Cormac and Flann Mac Lonan should be noted here, they differ sharply from the narratives that are generally assigned to a mythological cycle. Apart from these and the handful of brief texts described earlier in this chapter, it is striking that most of the Middle Irish tales with members of the Tuatha Dé as their protagonists are reworkings or new versions of stories that appear to have been composed in the Old Irish period. This might suggest a circumscribed body of source material, but as we have seen, we have the evidence of such works as Laur Gabála Éireann and the Dinsenkos, and especially of Flann's Maestranach poems, Flann Maestranoc's poem on the deaths of the Tuatha, then many more such stories were known. The reason for this state of affairs is not yet clear. I might just try and finish off this book tonight. So now we go on to chapter 6, the later tradition. Several further tales concerning the Tuatha were composed in the later Middle Ages. To a greater or lesser extent, most of these can be seen to depend heavily on the earlier literature, but some of them developed this inherited material in intriguing ways. He states here that for the sake of consistency throughout the volume, he has in this chapter followed the conventions of Old Irish spelling in rendering the names of persons and places. I see. Two stories are directly derived from the pseudo-historical lore concerning the Tuatha Dé Danann, from Leabhar Gabála Érenn and from the Middle Irish redaction of Cat Maig Tuired, which itself, as we have seen, incorporated material from Leabhar Gabála Érenn. A manuscript of the 17th century contains the unique copy of an early modern Irish retelling of Cat Maig Tuired. Bran O'Cuath, in his edition of this text, commented on its stilted, bombastic style and its artificially archaic language, and he noted the difficulties it involving in attempting to determine its date with any exactitude. He held, however, that it would seem not unlikely that our version was descended from an original compiled some centuries earlier. Let me take a quick drink. Okay. The story follows its predecessor in many points of plot, and even in the stylistic device of incorporating obscure rhythmical speeches or rhetorics in the narrative. There are, however, several important differences as well, such as the fates meted out to the tyrant's breasts and to Lug's monstrous grandfather Balor. While the older form of the tale is mainly concerned with the events leading up to the battle, from Bress's conception onwards, the later version concentrates on the battle itself. In addition to the rhetorics, the account is embellished with a series of ornate speeches delivered by the leaders on both sides. These correspond to nothing in the earlier telling, and presumably have their ultimate inspiration in the Irish translations of such Latin epics as Virgil's Aeneid and Lucan's Pharsalia. As noted above, case can be made for seeing the old Irish Cat Maig Tuired as a parable of the cultural politics of the 9th century. Similarly, Michael... I pronounced an Irish name Michal as Michael for some reason, like a Russian name. I think I just got very confused for a second. My brain just just shut down. Michal Hoyne has argued that its early modern Irish successor was inspired by a battle fought at Maig Tuired between two groups of Connacht lords in the year 1398, and that it was written specifically as propaganda for the Maig Diarmuida of Moylurg. The story finds a different application in the poem Mór ar Breag Riat Ari Saxon, Great or Anger Towards You, King of the English, composed by Guthrig Fian O'Dalig in the interval AD 1356 to 1358. Here it is not a Gaelic prince, but a young Anglo-Norman lord, Maurice Fitzmaurice, Earl of Desmond, who is compared to Lug entering Tara shortly before the Great Battle, and Nuadu's court serves as a counterpart to that of Edward III in London. The pseudo-historical tradition distinguishes between the battle fought at Maig Tuired between the Tuatha Dé Danann and the Fomori, in which Lug defeated Bress, and an earlier battle of Maig Tuired fought between the Tuatha Dé Danann and their kinsmen, the Fir Bolg, for control over Ireland. The latter is narrated in a tale preserved in TCD-MS 1319, the work of at least two scribes. There are fragments of another version in the UCD OFM MS A33, In the remarks which introduce his edition, John Fraser suggests that we have here the result of several revisions of a text which may in part go back to the early MLOR period, early modern Ireland period. There's a little note here that just says the first battle of Moytura. Okay. But I am not aware of any evidence that directly supports such an assessment, while there is at least one indication to the contrary. The tale includes a poem from Laur Gabála Éireann containing some readings that are otherwise found only in the copy of that work in the Book of Ballymote, 14th to 15th century, not even in the closely related copy in the Great Book of Lecan. The author of this story distinguishes himself by his extensive knowledge of lore concerning the settlements of Ireland, and he goes into considerable detail in his account of how the ancestors of the Tuatha Dé Danann and the Fir Bolg were obliged to leave Ireland, and of the adventures and wanderings of those peoples that led to their return. In what he says of the battle itself, his sympathies seem to be evidently divided between the two sides. After the death of the Fir Bolg King Éachaid, in which overwhelming thirst plays a role, motif probably drawn from Tógáil Brúdna de Derga, it is at least agreed that the Tuatha Dé Danann will exercise rule over the greater part of Ireland, but will cede Connacht to the Fir Bolg. It is interesting that Brez is portrayed positively throughout. At one point he is said to be the brother of the Dagda and of Ogma. This was evidently the original doctrine concerning him, but it is one which is expressly denied in the Old Irish Cat Maeg Turid and in most subsequent texts. Another tale that takes the Battle of Mag Turid as one of its points of departure is Óhig Cloin Turin, the death of the children of Turin. Mention has been made above of a story summarized in one of its versions of the Laur Gabála Éireann of how the three sons of Tural Bicaro. Oh, maybe it's not Picaro but Bicrio. I don't know, because now it's B rather than P. Were obliged by Lug to go in quest of a series of magical treasures as recompense for having killed Lug's father Cian. In Flann Maishnach's poem on the death of the Tuatha Dé Danann, it is stated that they were killed themselves by Lug on the Isle of Man. Placing these incidents against the backdrop of a great battle, a later author constructed a grim story of revenge and tragedy. The tale, however, rather inconsequentially, with an account of how begins, however, rather inconsequentially, with an account of how Nuadu's arm was restored to him. Not, as in Céad Maeg Turid, by one of his own physicians, but by three strangers, the same individuals who also give a second eye to Nuadu's one-eyed gatekeeper. With this, the narrative moves to the preparations for the great battle. Cian, seeking aid for his son Lug in the impending conflict with the Fomori, stumbled upon the sons of Turin, clearly identical with the sons of Tural in the older story. As hereditary enemies of his kindred, they murdered him, and presently the crime was discovered. In imposing the blood price upon the culprits, Lug claimed that he would use the treasures to gain victory over the enemy, but the battle itself forms no part of the story, and Lug's ultimate aim in setting the brothers such a series of perilous tasks was to bring about their deaths. They were indeed successful in accomplishing all that has been asked of them, due largely to a combination of trickery and wholesale violence, but they were mortally wounded in carrying out the final exploit, and died as a consequence of Lug's refusal to forgive his enemies, even after they had made the covenanted payment. The oldest manuscript of the tale was written in AD 1684. It is generally grouped together with the death of the children of Lear, of which more, and the death of the children of Usnach, a late version of the Ulster Cycle tale, Loingus mac Uslam. That these three are often transmitted together and are referred to collectively as Trí Truatha na Scéal Iachta, the Three Sorrows of Storytelling, has led some scholars to suggest that all three might be the work of a single author, but since both the grouping and the designation appear to go back only to the 18th century, this hypothesis seems implausible. An eccentric Latin version of the opening portion of the story, apparently composed early in the 17th century by one Hugh Casserly, is found on some paper leaves bound on the front of Harley MS 528. Oh. A poem by Gofrig Fion O'Dalig, who died in 1387, alludes to the fall of the sons of Turin on Knock Mac Mechel, as this is a climactic episode, and one to which nothing in the Middle Irish evidence corresponds. It appears likely that our tale goes back at least to the 14th century. This indication of the date has led Caveen Breithnoch to suggest that the story was written as an exemplary myth, rather like Cath Meg Turid several centuries earlier. In the present case, however, the exemplum's message is a negative one. By portraying the Tuatha Dé Dananns as riven by feuds and vengeance, the author has, in Breithnoch's view, alluded to a contemporary situation, the self-destructive rivalry of the great lordship, Anglo-Norman lordships during the reigns of the first Edwards. Whatever about the details of this hypothesis, and it is one that Breithnoch advances very tentatively, there can be no doubt that he is correct in calling attention to the problematic darkness of the picture which the tale presents to us. The Oihig Cloyne Lear, or the Death of the Children of Lear, is attested mainly in manuscripts of the 18th and 19th century. The oldest surviving copy appears to be that in Edinburgh National Library of Scotland, MS and ADV 72.1.38, whatever that means, dated to the 16th or early 17th century, and the story is mentioned in a document that seems to have been written around 1500. The tale retells how a dispute between two lords of the Sheed, both Durg, son of the Dagda, and Lear of Sheed Finachid, is resolved when Bo bestows his foster daughter, Abe, on Lear as a wife. Abe bears Lear two sets of twins, a daughter named Fingula, and three sons named Ive, Theacha, and Con, but dies in the course of her second labour. Lear then marries Abe's sister, Aoife, but she becomes jealous of her stepchildren, transforms them into swans. They are condemned to spend 3 periods, or 3 centuries each, in 3 different locations. During this time they experience grievous suffering, and the brothers are repeatedly comforted by Finguala. At last they come under the protection of Saint Molchamoch, who eventually regain a human appearance, but now they are shriveled with age, and they die immediately after having gained assurance of salvation through their acceptance of baptism. The background of the story has been variously assessed. James Cairney noted resemblances between the tribulations of the children of Lear and those experienced by the legendary forest-dwelling madman Sibna Gailt, holding indeed that the tale of OCL, in this case the children of Lear, just the Irish words for it, is to a large extent based upon the 12th century tale known to us as Bula Suvna. In a detailed recent study, Caveen Breithnoch has acknowledged these similarities, but proposes a considerably more sophisticated reading of the narrative. In his view, its main thrust is devotional, with evocations of the sufferings of sinful souls and of the vanity of worldly pleasures, contrasting with the abiding joys of heaven. He suggests that the author may have been a Franciscan, perhaps writing in Westmead in the late 15th century. It is evident that the story we have is a late composition, and there's a note here that this can be readily seen from the name Lear itself, which is not, so far as I know, attested before the early modern Irish period. It is in fact not originally a name at all, but a petrified genitive of the common noun Lear, or sea, extracted from Manannan's epithet Mac Lear, the son of the sea. The spiritual concerns of the later Middle Ages, as well as the descriptions of privation in Bula Suvna, may well have influenced the author, but accounts must also be taken of 2 other sources, international folk tales, and earlier stories concerning the Tuatha Dé. The folk tale type, from which the Oihig Cloyne Lear can most readily be compared is that which has been designated the maiden who seeks her brother, or brothers. Here, a group of brothers are transformed, often into swans, by a stepmother, who eventually restores them, thanks to self-sacrificing heroism of their sister. We may be reminded here of the protective role assumed by Finguala. There are several further tales in medieval Irish which involve the metamorphosis of an innocent victim, transformed in these cases not by a stepmother, but by a rival wife or lover. Besides Tokmakatane, noted above, there is a story of how one Sheed woman changed another into a crane, which then lived for 200 years in the house of Manannán, and another of a woman whose rival, said in one version to be a fairy mistress, changed her into a dog. The many centuries, she'd be a great VTuber. There are many centuries of Atane's sufferings after she has become a fly, are especially reminiscent of the ideal of the children of Lear. Comparable elements are also apparent in the story of Liban, a princess who is changed into a fish or mermaid, and wanders the sea for 3 centuries until she finds baptism and a pious death in the care of saintly clerics. Like Finguala, Liban recites a poem describing her transformed existence and remembering happier days. Late and in many respects innovative as it is, therefore OCL can be seen to be dependent at every level on traditions and tales concerning the Tuatha Dé, which can be traced back into the Middle Irish and indeed the Old Irish periods. Altram Tigda Veder, the fosterage of the House of Two Vessels, the last story to be considered in this survey, survives only in the Book of Fermoy, but a poem lamenting the heroine's death, which St. Patrick is made to utter at the tale's conclusion, is preserved in various later manuscripts. The narrative begins by relating how, after the Tuatha Dé Danann had been defeated by the Gaels, Manannán grants them invisibility and immortality, and allots a Sheed throughout Ireland to them as dwellings. Subsequently, he instructs Ongus Och in this stratagem, which enables him to wrest possession of Brú na Bóinne from his foster father Elkmar. Shortly thereafter, a girl named Ethna is born to the steward and is taken in fosterage by Ongus. Years later, an insulting remark by Ongus's brother induces such a paroxysm. I don't know what that word. Paroxysm. Paroxysm. Let me take a read. Take a quick paroxysm. A sudden attack or outburst of a particular emotion or activity. Ah, I see. Okay. That's interesting to note. Such a paroxysm of shame that Edna's guardian demon, the man Codechta, is driven out of her, and an angel takes its place. Henceforth, she can no longer eat the food of the Sheed, and subsists on the milk of 2 cows, one belonging to Ongus and one to Manannán, which have been brought from the righteous land of India. Her consumption of this milk is the fosterage of the House of Two Vessels. After the coming of the Fate to Ireland, Etna becomes separated from her companions and is taken under the protection, first of a cleric named Kesson, and subsequently of Patrick himself. Patrick refuses, this is St. Patrick by the way, refuses to restore her to Ongus. She then asks the saint to baptize her, and dies a fortnight thereafter. The account of Ongus's seizure of Brú na Bóinne is comparable in various ways to the Gabal in Shida and to the first episode of Tokmak Etain, but there are important differences as well, at least some of which appear to antedate the story in its present form. Intriguingly, essential elements of the portrayal of Etna herself seem to be drawn from hagiography. A partial basis for her has been plausibly found in the Princess Etna, daughter of Logair MacNeil, who is said to have died immediately following her baptism by Patrick. And her subsistence on milk, rather than on the food of the Tuatha Dé, recalls the inability of Bridget in the so-called Vita Prima Bridete to stomach the food of the druid whose house she is living, for which she substitutes the milk of a white cow. But traditions of a supernatural Etna must lie at the root of the tale all the same. As Claire Dagger has pointed out, wow, that's some name, Dagger. The circumstances that Etna is both reared and buried beside the Boyne can scarcely be disassociated from the statements in other sources that Etna was the name of Elkmar's wife, or even of the tutelary Boand herself. And so she suggests that Etna's burial of the ecclesiastical site Kel Etna is simply another way of saying that the Boyne area was of particular significance as a centre of Christian worship, an area with which the goddess Etna was also closely associated. More than any of the other tales which have been discussed, Altram Tig de Vader is concerned with the relationship between Christianity and the native supernatural. Not only does it tell how Etna received a guardian angel even during her time within the Sheed, and recount her rejection of her former life for the sake of salvation, but the beginning of the story includes a discourse by Manannán on the superiority of the one god to the gods of the pagan Irish. Similar preoccupations can be recognized in such probably more or less contemporary texts as a Column na Senorch, the Colloquy of the Old Men, or Ectra Tegid Veich Cain, the Adventures of Taig MacCain. Yes, that should have been Taig. I realized very quickly. And in the conclusion of a somewhat earlier scale, na Fíor Flacha, the tale of the ordeals of sovereignty. For whatever reason, the place of the Tuatha Dé in Christian Ireland came once more to be the subject of frequent reflection in the later Middle Ages. And now we reach the last page, the conclusion. I have given considerable attention in the course of this study to the problems inherent in positing a mythological cycle as part of the taxonomy of medieval Irish literature. As we have seen, it is unclear what should be included in such a grouping, and I expect that another scholar undertaking such a survey would arrive at a different selection, perhaps a very different selection from that which is offered here. And when such stories are identified, as often as not, the tradition itself has its own way of classifying them, as Remscéla, for example, or as pseudo-historical lore. These difficulties of categorization are important if confronted throughout, thoughtfully. They can help us to appreciate the inscrutability of the Tuatha Dé themselves, beings who are so essential to the Irish narrative, and at the same time, so elusive. Even if the medieval Irish never conceived the stories about the Tuatha Dé as constituting a cycle, let alone a mythological one, such an examination as has been undertaken here indicates how extensive a body of literature was devoted to the people of the Sheed between the 7th and the 17th century. A literature drawing on multitudinous traditions, both popular and learned. Supernatural entities certainly figure in other medieval literatures, and Iceland in particular produced what could, with considerably more justice than is the case for Ireland, be called a mythological cycle. Nevertheless, I am aware of nothing that can really be compared with the stories that we have been considering. The ambiguous nature of the Tuatha Dé, the complex genealogies, their rootedness in the fabric of the landscape, their potencies as symbols and personifications, and the vividness with which some of them emerge as narrative protagonists. All of these elements show how crucial and how far-ranging but all was their place in the inner world of the Gael. And that's the end of that book. A very short book than what I usually read. Usually the stuff we're reading is like 200, 300 pages, and I'd have like another 10 reading streams ahead of me. But it was nice to get a short book out of the way. I hope those of you who listened, and who either had me on as background noise or whatever, enjoyed the little bit that you may have caught. I like thinking of this stuff almost kind of like an audiobook that you throw on while you're driving, or maybe you're going to sleep, and you use it to be comfy, like Ruadh there in the corner. Ruadh comfy, with an I, by the way, not a Y, an I. Very important that it's fee. And that's kind of how I'd like to picture these things. Of course, any of my previous readings can be found on my YouTube channel. It should be linked on Twitch. I'm quite sure it's linked on Twitch. Yes. That's more of a VOD channel. Some of my reading streams I'm quite sure I have set up as playlists, but you should be able to just quickly fly through the list of VODs there. Unfortunately, there are some that are missing, and I'm very upset about that, I have to say. I do want to go back and reread those sections of the books that I missed. I obviously just missed uploading VODs to that channel, so I don't know what happened. It's very frustrating, but you know, it is what it is. Sometimes that happens. But now I'm being very careful. I regularly check my YouTube to make sure that I have like the latest streams and stuff, and that everything is working. But no, we got a lot of little followers and some new people in, which was really cool. I'm quite surprised because usually my reading streams are kind of very low key, just kind of chilling with, you know, the usual people. But this one was this seemed to catch a lot of people. So maybe people have an interest in Irish mythology, I suppose. Maybe I should definitely consider reading more Irish-based stuff. I have quite a few books. We could even look at some modern Irish history. But I definitely want to read the Táin someday, which I have. And then there's another big book all about like a deep dive into Irish history, medieval history, I'm quite sure. But yeah, I'm going to look for someone to possibly raid. Oh, there's a dragon reading a copy pasta. Or no, not a copy pasta, a creepy pasta. Oh, I'm going to sneak. Okay. I did sneeze, but it wasn't like a cute sneeze. It would have just been loud. Sometimes I do have cute sneezes, but I don't want to take that chance. But I'm going to send, because we're both doing the same thing, we're both doing reading, I'm going to send you guys over to a Shadow Dragon Claws. She has a very nice model. It kind of, I think it's literally just the fact that she has green hair, but I was reminded of what was her name again? The Hololive Girls. Rushia. But like solely because of the green hair. Solely because of the shoulder length green hair. That's the only reason. Not even shoulder length actually, it's like neck length. But I like her little design, it's cute. And I like the dragon tail. I like dragons when they have that they have like those scale details on their skin. One of my friends, the NPC Demon, some of you guys may know who she is. She did a really cool model recently for someone who's a dragon, and she has those like scale details all on her inner thighs, which are very, very visible in the outfit, I have to say. She did an amazing job though. But we're going to raid into Shadow Dragon Claws. So I will once again thank you guys so much for joining me today. It's always very, very appreciated. I will see you guys next time. I'm probably gonna play. I might play some Baldur's Gate next stream, or maybe do another reading stream or something. I don't know, or maybe do like just a normal ASMR. I suddenly feel I've been really good with keeping up with streaming recently, so I'm really happy. But I will see you guys next time. Good Mila Mahagat and Slán go Fóill. Or Slán go Fóill, I should say. See you guys. Bye bye.